What's up, everyone? Go ahead and drop a comment if we are officially live. As you see from the plant sticking out of the side of me, I am not in my normal spot. That is because I went on a last-minute trip to Arizona to visit my mom, my number one favorite client ever. And she basically lives in a glass house. So the lighting is terrible for going live. So I'm in the darkest corner of her house to try to be able to see the screen. So if I am live, go ahead, drop a comment. Hopefully you can hear me because I have a very special guest today and I can't wait to start talking about it. Okay, so I'm not seeing any comments, but it looks like on my phone that I am live with comments. So Restream might be doing something funky, but that's okay because we're just going to wing it. So without any further ado, welcome. Katherine, thank you for being here.
Thank you so very much for having me. Why does my head look so big? Like, I want to address that real quick. I look like the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland. Like, no, it's fine. You can leave it. I just think it's hilarious. Like you look all normal and then my head's like this big. I don't know why, but I think it's very funny.
So weird how like the different camera, the horizontal or vertical, how it can impact the picture.
Oh, yeah.
All the things job seekers have to stress about when they're getting ready.
I know. I just wanted to, that's why I brought it up. I was like, this is just one of those things that you notice all of a sudden, like, oh, why is this happening? But you just have to roll with it. It's okay.
We got 30 minutes. In an interview, you typically have 30 minutes. And so you just have to roll with the punches. And so with that being said, Katherine, could you please introduce yourself just to make sure everybody knows how much of a rock star you are?
Well, thank you so very much. My name is Katherine McCord. I run two companies. One is well established. That one's Titan Management. We do all things people consulting. We're a very inclusion-focused organization. And then I also have Titan ATS, which is an anti-bias applicant tracking system that fires the resume. Super stoked about that. That actually just officially fully rolled out a few months ago in its entirety. Super excited. And then I have two shows. One is Career Launch Live, which is all about all things people in the workplace. And then the other is the Supermania show, which is all about neurodiversity and mental health.
Love it. And we're talking about both of those topics today, right? Accommodations
Absolutely.
While on the job search. And so one of the questions that I always get asked is if you have some type of disability, do you have to disclose it? And so what's the deal with that? Or if you decide so for me, I'm dyslexic, have a speech impediment and a memory deficit. I don't check a box when I'm on the application. And I have a feeling that you have a lot to say about those boxes on the application.
That could be, you might have that inclination because I just did a whole post on a whole rant about that. So I do. So first of all, I will say my personal opinion is that unless you are a government organization who are required to do those types of things, do not, and I repeat, do not have an EEO survey attached to applications. If you're an employer, please put them as an anonymous optional survey after the application, because it's the great way to still collect the data. But also it's a more inclusive approach, because even if it goes into the black abyss of the ATS, which is typically where that information actually goes, it still gives the perception that somebody could be discriminated against. It makes the candidates feel uncomfortable, and it's just not worth it. So That being said, number one, no, you do not have to disclose. You can even lie if you want to and say, no, I do not have a disability, even though technically, according to the ADA, you do. I, by the way, in the same way. So I do not see myself as disabled, even though technically, according to the ADA, I do have several disabilities. it's one of those things that there's no real repercussions if you don't check that box. An employer cannot really come back. Now, the only time it might bite you is if later you come back to ask for an accommodation and they go, well, wait a minute, over here. But most places don't check. I will tell you that most places don't check that. They just kind of roll with it when you go, when you first announce. So I don't really worry about that. Do whatever you feel is comfortable on those questionnaires, but you do not have to disclose. The only time that I think that you should disclose is if you need something. Okay. So once it becomes relevant, right? So even in the interview process, if what you need is not relevant until you get to a certain stage, then just bring it up when it's that certain stage. And then it's all in how you say it, right? So one of my things is sometimes I have some seizure activity on the left side of my face. It's visible in some of the lives I've done over the last year or so. I started going on camera even when it happens. And the reason that I bring that up is that if I do an on-camera presence, it can actually cause more activity. And so I often ask to be off camera. And so that's my accommodation. And so if you're going to do a Zoom interview and you wake up and that's a thing, you might need to bring that up. So that's when I would address it. And the way I choose to address it is if I still feel that I should be on camera for whatever reason, then I just say, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on. I'm perfectly fine. Let's keep on going. And then if I'm not going to be, if I absolutely need to be off camera, I just say, hey, just so you know, I'm having a little bit of some seizure activity today. I'm perfectly fine. I'm capable of completing this call, this interview, whatever it is, but this is just what's going on with me today. And I just say it as a very simple, but don't worry, I still got it. I still got you. I'm here. Yep. I just, being on camera would just be a little stressful for me today. So yeah, that's my first response to that. Bring it up when it's relevant.
I love that question. Because so often it's, do I bring it up? Should I bring it up? I really do need support. I recently, with a Job Connection Tuesday Collective, which is now called The Collective, something or another, Dan's going to be like, you should know the name of the group.
He's going to shame us for not knowing this.
But we recently just changed the group name, and The Collective, Equity and Inclusion, or Inclusion and Equity, whatever it may be. All
about inclusion. That's the whole point.
Exactly. Yep. We're all about being a resource for anyone who joins. And one of the members of the group, she's deaf, but she can read lips. And as an editor, it doesn't impact her ability to do her job, but she continues having to do Zoom interviews, and she asks for the subtitles. And so often recruiters aren't doing that in advance, or will get on the Zoom interview and then realize that that's something that she needs and doesn't know how to do it, and then just ghost her after that. And so when people are brave enough to say, yes, I do need an accommodation, and then recruiters don't handle it well, what's your advice for job seekers to move forward from there? Is that like a sign like, hey, stay away from the company? Or is that just a sign, hey, maybe that recruiter just didn't know any better and the company may still be worth pursuing?
The second one, definitely. In most cases. Now, there are some cases I've heard of where the company refused to do an accommodation, like the recruiter asked and then the company refused. If that's the case, forget them. That's an awful company. Maybe report them, actually. I have links where you can do that. It's very simple, and it just lets the ADA or the EEO organization know, hey, you need to go talk to this company. They don't know what they're doing. Okay. And so that's one thing. No, typically it's just somebody that doesn't know better. And on behalf of everyone who works in talent acquisition, let me apologize for those people, because it is our jobs to be good at this, not yours. Okay. You don't need to be good at interviewing. You don't need to be good at any of this stuff. This is supposed to be our domain. So when someone fails epically like that, that's really hurtful to me, because you're not just being lousy at your job and hurting your company, you're also hurting these individual human beings. So that's really hard. Also, I would say help people know how to help you. So what I mean by that, so let's use this very specific example that you brought up, and I'm sure that she does this, of letting them know ahead of time. Yep. If you know how to do it, I would also recommend letting them know, go, hey, Here are the steps, just because it can be really hard to figure out. And if you're a recruiter who has back to back phone calls, having time to also figure this out could be kind of overwhelming. So if you know, and it is still on them to do, but if you can do them a favor and let them know, hey, this is how you do this. I had a candidate a while back who has dyslexia and asked me, hey, can we use this app for this particular step of my interview process with your client? And I said, sure, how do we do that? And we just kind of coordinated together for that. And so that worked out beautifully. Just kind of gave me a heads up like, hey, I just need you to use this little app. Here's how you do it. No big deal. That really goes a long way. So the more that you can help them, because we are not all technologically savvy. Okay. And recruiters are just getting used to this whole Zoom thing. Most of them have not actually been given any kind of training. They're just like, here, click a link and do this. So if you can help them, that really goes a long way. In any case like that really helps. But outside of that, educate them, do your best, but sometimes you're just gonna have to go, okay, this recruiter stinks, let's see how the next stage goes. And then if the stages after that go well, write it off as that one person is just bad at their job, most unfortunately.
I love that advice to help them through it, because one concern a lot of clients have is, well, what if they then discriminate me because I needed an accommodation during the interview process, and then they're concerned about how that's going to play out with their stakeholders, clients, whoever it is that I may be serving. And so if you can go in the interview and show them that you can help support the team accommodate you, and it's a seamless process and it made everyone feel really comfortable, it's a way to hint to those organizations that your approach to your accommodations can be a huge value add to the overarching organization.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's exactly why that works. It's a good way to keep the relationship and to be more reasonable about your reasonable accommodation, right? If you already know how to do it, just show them. But then also it does show them, and I tell everybody when you're interviewing, everything needs to be about how I can help you and how I'm going to be successful in this job, right? Nobody really cares what you did in the past. They care what you could do for them. Yeah. And so when you're showing them, see, I can do this, it's no big deal. This took like 20 seconds of your time. Now it's not a big deal. You know, all of a sudden it's just this very, very benign situation, and it really kind of calms everything down. Now, I also want to say that there are still people that will discriminate against you. Okay. Human beings in general suck. And so I'm laughing, but it's true. And so you will still receive discrimination, but we are going to tell you ways to help with that. So the reason that people are so averse to things that they don't know or understand is that their brain actually tells them that that's bad and sends chemical responses that makes them actually feel averse and afraid and that type of thing. So the best thing you can do is to calm that part of the brain down by giving it more information, explaining what you need, taking steps and walking through, giving them an easy solution that's an alternative. So and everything should be toward, this is how I'm going to do this when I come on board. And it's, look how easy it is. So if you have, let's say, if you have a technology that works best for you, and you already have everything set up in your technology, instead of taking their Zoom link, say, hey, would you mind using as my accommodation? Would you mind using this link to this? And it's the exact same process for them. They just click a little button and voila, they're in the meeting with you. No big deal. So never be afraid to do that kind of thing either. You don't have to do everything on their terms. You can say, hey, this is what works better for me. It's already set up. Do you mind if we just use this?
Okay. All right. So when you're working with clients who are asking for accommodations and they get forms and things to fill out, what's the deal with that? Like, what are these forms? Why do companies make candidates or new employees fill them out? And what can they say yes or no to? I know that opens up a huge can of worms. You can take it wherever you want to take it.
The first thing I will say is shame on those companies. You never need to know why, you just need to know what. Let's just put that on out there. All you need to know is that this person needs this. Period. That is the end of the statement. There doesn't need to be an explanation of why. Please quit being so nosy. That would just make everyone's life so much better. The one time that I completely side with, and in fact, this came up in a class I recently taught, the one time I really side with asking for more explanation is if it's something expensive, which is very, very rare. Most accommodations are very inexpensive, but let's say you need an ergonomic chair that costs $2,000. Well, there's probably first of all, one that costs less that would actually work just fine. But if it's an accommodation like that, that's actually going to, I actually once had a candidate that needed a whole new desk because of wheelchair, right? And the company was fine with it, but they did ask for certain documentation just to justify it to their board and all of that. No big problem. So in situations like that where it's more expensive, you might be asked, but even then, they don't need to know every single detail. All you need to provide is a letter from your doctor stating that you need this accommodation for this reason.
Okay.
The end. It does not need to be like a detailed account. Like I had one lady not long ago. This was so funny. She literally emailed every detail of what would happen if they didn't accommodate her, and it got so graphic and so upsetting. And I was like, "Oh gosh, I understand. Thank you so much for how detailed you were, but that was." You don't need to share that much. That's okay. And so we kind of worked on that for future reference for her. So you don't need to be too detailed, just very, very strategic of this is what you need. This is why. Just go to your doctor. Maybe you already have that ready if it's something that you know a company may bug. If it's something super cheap and easy, like let's say you see my giant headphones here. So this is actually part of an accommodation that I need because I can't hear very well. And and this actually helps me to be able to hear better and to focus better. And so whenever it's something that simple, you shouldn't need to provide documentation. That's real weird that they would ask. Now, they still technically are allowed to ask for it, but I would maybe ask them, hey, is there a way that, this is just a simple equipment request. Is it okay? Maybe present it that way, that this is an equipment request for something that will help me to work more effectively, and not quite call it an accommodation unless they push it. Because a lot of companies, if you just say, hey, I really prefer this equipment, they'll run with it. They don't care. Because either way, they got to buy you equipment. It's fine. Or if you want to provide your own, just say, hey, I really prefer my own. It's more comfortable for me. Companies don't buck that. They just don't. And hey, you're making it easier on them. They're all about that. So just let them know. But if it's going to be something a little bit more complex, just be ready for that very standard letter from your doctor. And then once you're in the company and they know you better, maybe talk to them about making accommodations standard, which is a big thing that all companies should be doing. It should just be standard options. Just here's all the things that we can do to make your life better.
Yep.
Pick the things that you want, whatever that is. Whatever that is.
Really need to think about that. They're all about diversity and inclusion and belonging, but like, what are they actually doing to make it easier for people to feel more comfortable coming forward with that? When I was
not much.
a semi truck and had the massive concussion, I actually was able to go back to work like in a week or 2 weeks. And I had to sit and I had to give them all of my documentation for that to be okay, to sit in a classroom. And then the most terrible thing is then I got bashed into a cement wall from a student who was not on his meds. And then I was out for a year from additional brain trauma. And when I was on the interview process afterwards, especially being in a government agency, my file just transfers over. So they see, okay, she was in a work-related accident. I was not at fault. A semi-truck hit me, and weather-related. And then I came back for a couple of weeks, then was assaulted, and then has been out all of this time because of a major brain injury. Well, what's going to happen if we hire her? And I actually had multiple people in the interview process say, hey, I know that you relocated to a different state after your accident to be back by family again. I'm like, I didn't disclose any of that, but they can see your records, your internal records. And then it was, well, what if you get sick again? Or what if something happens? It's like, well, my doctors say I'm clear to go to work. I've been itching to go to work for the past 6 months. And so I don't see what the problem is. And I went through multiple agencies until I found one who felt comfortable enough to hire me. And it was no problem, but it was infuriating. And I know that my medical issue is really consistent with clients who, were out of work because of cancer, who were, left the workforce because their child had a disability and they had to support the
Yeah.
child until arrangements could be made or whatever. And employers and interviewers a lot of times are really transparent that that's the case. What would be your advice to a candidate who just blatantly experienced something like this? Like, oh, are you sure your child's not going to be a problem again? Like,
Oh God. Oh yeah. First of all, don't ask that. Like,
yes, recruiters, hiring managers, please
recruiters
stop.
for so many reasons, all of the reasons, do not say that. Like big X on those types of questions. So a while back, I had a candidate, and I'm going to use this example because it's so easy to pick apart why they should have been people should have been overlooking this. So this gentleman, he was a wonderful candidate, and we were having a conversation, and I did tell him, I said, okay, I'm sorry, I've got to ask because my client's going to ask, get a 2-year employment gap. Yep. And I knew something. I wasn't worried about it all. And I want to state for the record, I could not possibly care less, but I knew my client would ask me why. So I said, okay. I said, as brief as you want to be. I said, you could, as vague as you want to be, it's perfectly fine. But in general, what happened here? And he said, I don't mind telling you. He said, my son was diagnosed with terminal cancer when he was 7 years old. And I decided to take time off to be with him for the remainder of his life. And he said, I had the financial means to do it. So I put in my notice and I left my company with the owner's blessing. He goes, I have references from them. And he goes, and if this costs me that opportunity, I understand. That's been happening a lot. And the first thing in my head was like, what? Why are people not wanting this human to come work with them?
Who did the right thing?
Who did the right thing? So let me pick this apart for people who are thinking to themselves, yeah, but it was a 2-year employment gap. Okay, first of all, in 2 years, you might lose a step, and you will. Yeah, because you haven't done something. You might lose a little step, but you're not going to lose everything. Okay. Second of all, let me tell you from very personal experience that being a caregiver gives you a whole other set of skills and a whole other level of patience and a whole other level of understanding that other people just don't have that haven't done it. I have had the pleasure and the honor of doing that twice in my life. And let me tell you, that's something that you really learn from, especially when it's a terminal situation. Yeah. So A, you have somebody who's got all these skills, right? B, he's not really going to lose that much. But C, let's also, this thing that a lot of people miss, one of the first things I heard is, I had the financial means to take 2 years off. So let's stop with this. This is a highly responsible person, a person who thinks forward, a person who's gone above and beyond to make sure that everything is taken care of. What does that tell you about that person? And even just somebody who has the gumption to say, I'm not in a financial position, but I need to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make it work. Who doesn't want that gumption in their company? Who doesn't want somebody who just has, excuse my language, but that kind of balls? Like that's what you want. That's what you want in your company. So, first of all, candidates, if this is your experience, if you have had your own trauma, if you've had, my sister has a TBI. I have a good friend, Dawn Westmoreland. She and I did a whole show on TBIs and what that looks like as a neurodiversity. If you've, illness, whatever it is, or if you're a caretaker, you bring value from your experience. Okay. Now, relating that to an employer can be a little challenging sometimes. So before you go in, think about the things that you learned during that time and actively talk about them. Actively talk about the things that you gained during that time. Maybe you learned patience that you never knew you had. Maybe you had to learn a new way to learn, and that taught you a whole lot. Maybe, whatever it is that happened. Maybe you had to deal with, 50 different medical providers, and you had to learn a whole new organizational system and how to really talk to people, dig and find resources and that type of thing. Great. Talk about that. Highlight that, help people to understand, because if they haven't been there, they just don't get it. Okay. Like it's no fault of their own. They don't get it. They just, in their mind, you were just sitting around with some sick person. They don't know what it's like because they've never done it, and they've never been the sick person. And let me tell you, I've been on that side of it too.
I am co-signing all of this. So often as a recruiter, candidates would try to hide it. And I get if it's too personal to talk about or too emotional to talk about, whatever it may be. But if you are in a position where you can confidently go in and say, yes, I had this break. This is what I was doing during this time. These are all of the things that I had to navigate and the new skills that I learned that were much harder than any executive role or leadership role or individual contributor role that I've ever held in the past. And it can bring that with a fresh set of eyes and empathy into this organization that is going to be a value add. And when you can go into it with confidence, despite all of that potential pain, it shows a different level of grit, compassion, empathy that organizations are really craving. And I feel like when somebody is dancing around something or maybe is giving it's coming across as maybe being ashamed of that time period versus sitting up proudly and saying, yes, this is what I did during this time period. It was an honor to do this.
Yes.
It comes across different. That candidate's confidence then is exuded across the hiring teams and then gives them the confidence to bring you on board.
Yes, 100%. And that works. And to that point, when I sent this candidate to my client, he ended up getting hired. And I've done this with other people in the past as well, where I just talked to them about how to talk about that experience or that gap or whatever it was, and how to talk about their disability, how to talk about their condition, whatever it was, and to show that that's something that actually helps. So I talk about that a lot, very publicly, about how my neurodiversity. So for people that don't know me already, so I have multiple neurodiversities. Two of them, the ones that I talk about the most, are bipolar 1 and also OCD. I am that person that categorizes my M&Ms and organizes them before I eat them. So, but these things are things that help me and that actually help me grow. And I explain to people, okay, so when I'm in my mania cycles, this is what happens. And it's pretty freaking awesome. I am like Superwoman. There is no stopping me when I'm in one of those cycles. There's, with my OCD, hyper organization, hyper focus, to certain types of details, not all types of details, but certain types of details. Ability to multitask in a way that most humans cannot. Most people can't multitask. I actually can when I'm in certain cycles. And then even down to some of my physical stuff. So I tell people, I have a joke about, I even have a ridiculous bladder condition, and I go to the bathroom like all the time. I'm like, this is actually a perk for work because it keeps me awake. Having to get up that much keeps me awake and functional and active. So, and then even with my seizure disorder, there are actual perks to that, believe it or not. And so it's, just that confidence and letting people know that, yeah, this happens and that's not the most fun, but all these things over here happen because of this. And it's awesome. And because of that, because of this thing that is different about me, I can do all of these other things. I think one of the most shining examples, so my mother has horrible rheumatoid arthritis, horrible. And so she walks in a walker, she looks very pitiful if you're just looking at her. Okay. So this woman who was a director of HR for a major healthcare organization for many, many years, she just retired, would go into a meeting looking so pitiful, and it would like disarm people. And then she would open her mouth and like shock the world with just the tenacity and the strength. And so it was actually kind of a little hidden like superpower of hers, because she was always that way as a person, but it was almost like it softened her as well. And it let people not be afraid of her, but instead just, because I get told all the time that I'm frightening, which I think is hilarious. Like, only if you deserve it. I only am here to be scary if you deserve it. If you're scared of me, there's a reason. But that strength, can be kind of overwhelming. So sometimes having something that'll soften you up and make you seem a little bit more approachable, but always find a strength. And whatever it is that's going on with you, there is a strength behind it. 100%.
I love that. So for everybody who's tuning in right now, my tech being out of town unexpectedly is a little wonky. So if you have any questions, we will get back to them in the chat. But I want I can see from my phone that over 37 people are on this live right now. And so that means you all are probably dealing with some type of an accommodation or are here to support me or Katherine, who both have disabilities in the workplace and are thriving. And so thank you all for being here. If you have any questions, make sure you drop them in the comments because we will come back and answer them. And if you're in a place right now where you're feeling really low, where you're on the job search and you feel like whatever it is that you need support with is the reason why you're not getting opportunities, I really challenge you to dig deep and remind yourself why you're such a badass, why whatever it is that makes you different, like Katherine said, is a superpower of yours. For me, my dyslexia, it literally makes it so my brain works differently than everyone else. And that is a superpower of mine. My speech impediment, what happens is I'm so self-conscious about how I sound to other people that I'm really sincere and thoughtful with the words that I use. And so that has been an advantage throughout my career. My memory deficit has made it so that I have to be organized. I am hyper organized, and that has always been seen as a strength for the team because if somebody misses a meeting, oh, we'll go ask Tegan. She's got all the notes. And so incorporate those examples, use them as strengths throughout the process. And if you feel comfortable doing so, and if you're not at the point where you feel comfortable doing so, find a coach who can help you coach through some of these things. Like Katherine says, she preps her candidates to how to talk about them, how to feel empowered by them. And so, Katherine, could you end us off by sharing what kind of recruitment that you do if a job seeker is interested in those types of roles, how to reach out to you or your team? And sorry, guys, I'm looking at two different cameras, so my eye contact might be terrible because I'm not sure which camera is actually working today. And just in general, how you support individuals that potentially need accommodations in the job.
Sure. So first of all, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions that you want to ask privately, if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, I'm always here to help people navigate these waters because they are kind of crazy, right? And sometimes you just need somebody else who's been there on both sides of the desk and can, kind of help you through it. So please feel free to reach out. I actually, right now, I am doing a lot more on the consulting side and less on the recruiting side right now. So I don't have a ton of open roles. However, I do know of 2 companies that are hiring a lot for tech support, so like IT type roles, that type of thing, sales. I also know some great sales organizations that are looking for some people. So those types of roles, please do feel free to reach out to me. I'm very, very happy to make an introduction for you. Even one of my favorite clients in the whole wide world is hiring. So I'm always glad to send them people. But outside of that, check out if you have questions. I have a show, Career Launch Live, that has tons of questions. If you're neurodiverse and you want to talk about that and learn more about that, check out Supermania show. Outside of that, I'm also going to be part of a great event called HR Disruptor coming up. And so if you are going to be in the HR field, if you're trying to pivot, anything like that, please join us. We have a virtual option. We have an in-person option. Love to meet you and talk to you. That's my spiel. And it was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Love it. Yes, for everybody tuning in, thank you so much for being here. I will get back to your comments now. Next week, I am going to be with another fellow collective group member, Jessica Williams, the job snatcher herself.
Love her, yes.
Building confidence in the corporate world. So this ties in perfectly with our conversation today because we have to have confidence with our abilities. And
that's right.
So it's a perfect segue in. And so Katherine, hang on there for just a second while we close out. So the live.
I did want to say one last thing that I wanted to tell everybody. I said this in my last live, and I think I'm just going to start saying this in every show. So I'm a huge Alice in Wonderland fan, right? And so I tell everybody, embrace your muchness. And your muchness is your diversity. That is what makes you unique, whatever that is. Grab it, grab hold of it, run with it. I promise you, the more you do, the more successful you will be.
Run with it. Love it. And I'm going to close the show out on that because that could not be a better mic drop. So, Katherine, thank you so much for joining me. And everybody else, we will see you soon enough.